There are several different items that can cause our problem, and we want to start by inspecting those located under the hood. The first area to check is our power steering fluid level. Now in this one, the power steering fluid level, it has a reservoir mounted on the pump. On your vehicle, it might be remote mounted. So once you locate that, you want to go ahead and remove it. On ours here, it has a dipstick on it, so you can actually tell the level height of it. Now our fluid is low right now, and it's not really even that dirty. But I'll tell you what, we probably do have a problem with this pump because it's been allowed to run low several times, and right now it's noisy. The next item we want to check is the drive belt. The drive belt is actually what powers the power steering pump. We want to look and see if there's any cracks in it, see if it's glazed or frayed. It's kind of dark in here, it's hard to see it. So let's take a look in here with a light. Okay, yeah, and I can tell by looking at the belt. Ours is in really poor condition. It's got a bunch of cracks in it. So we need to replace the belt, and we also need to replace this pump because the pump's been allowed to run dry several times and it's damaged it. So we know that what we need to do underneath the hood. The next thing to do is to go ahead and raise the car, we want to place it on jack stands and take a real good look underneath. The rack and pinion assembly on our Mustang is mounted right here in the front of the frame. On some vehicles, they'll mount it to the back side. Well, it makes it real easy for us to take a look at this. What we want to do is do a visual inspection of the rack and see if we see any problems. And I can, right off the bat, I can see we have two problems with it. One is we have a leak. Matter of fact, get a light and take a look at this. We have a leak right here, right above where the lines go into the rack. And you can even see where the bushing is swollen and is coming out of place because of the fluid leak on it. And looking at the other side, we got a problem with the mounting bushing on that too. So we have two problems with the rack we know right off the bat. One is we have a leak. The second is the attaching points on this. There's these two bolts here. Both of those are worn out. So that's going to allow the rack to actually move. The next thing I want to do, we've got the binding issue. I want to make sure that that problem's in our rack and pinion. And one way to find that out, we're going to go ahead and take the tires and wheels off. We're going to disconnect the tie rod ends from the steering arms, and then we're going to see if the binding's gone or if it's still there. So that's next. Well, with the wheel turned out, you can get a good look at what we're going to disconnect. This is our outer tie rod end. We want to disconnect that. That's going to actually disconnect the rack assembly from our wheel end. We're going to do this on both sides. The reason we're going to do that is simple. We've got the suspension system. We want to make sure we don't have a problem with the suspension system, and the problem is indeed in the rack. Now that the tie rod ends are removed, I can test the steering. If the problem had been in the suspension, the movement would now be smooth, but that's not the case. The wheel still appears to be sticking, so the problem is with the rack and it needs to be replaced. The steering wheel on modern vehicles contains numerous electrical connections for the horn, cruise control, airbag, and so on. The connections can be damaged if the steering wheel turns too far. Reconnect the tie rod ends and check to make sure that the steering wheel is centered and locked to make sure not to turn it once the rack is loose. This is especially important on vehicles equipped with airbags. Now, we already know we're going to replace our power steering pump in our rack assembly, but one thing we haven't talked about yet are the hoses. Now, in this vehicle, it has three hoses. We have the one pressure hose, the high pressure hose going from the power steering pump to the rack, and we have the return hose coming from the rack, but this also has an external power steering cooler assembly. It's basically a loop of tubing that goes up in front of the AC condenser. So then we have the third hose that goes from the cooler back to the reservoir of the power steering pump. Now on the hoses, none of the hoses really appear to be leaking, but this car is like 20 years old, so even if we weren't going to do the other power steering repairs on this would be a good time to replace these hoses. If you're ever in doubt, just replace them, because look at the outside of the hose, they may look fine, but they might be deteriorated on the inside and actually coming apart. Our next step now is to go ahead and go back up on top, and we're going to go ahead and remove the power steering pump. As with any job, to do it right, you'll need the right tools. The nice thing is that jobs today don't require a large, expensive assortment. Basic hand tools are generally all you'll need. In case where a specialty tool is required, be sure to check with AutoZone's Loan a Tool program. They have many specialty tools that can help you complete your job a lot quicker and easier. The first things you'll need are a socket set, torque wrench, drop light, tape measure, tie rod separator, and a repair manual for your specific vehicle. You may also need screwdrivers or pliers to remove some components. We will also need power steering fluid to replace what will be lost during the repair.
Be cautious when working under the hood. If the engine has been running, components will be extremely hot, so be careful what you touch. When working around a running engine, it is important to be alert and never wear loose clothing or a necktie that can get tangled in belts, pulleys, or the fan. When lifting a vehicle, never work under it until it has been secured with wheel blocks and securely positioned on jack stands. A hydraulic jack alone is never enough. Be cautious when working with oils and chemicals. Many are damaging to the groundwater environment and toxic to people and animals. Never drain or pour chemicals into the ground or sewer systems. Local municipalities and counties offer resources for proper disposal. And always remember to wear your safety glasses.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Get the entire DVD for this repair and all other procedures covered in the Complete Car Care series at your local AutoZone store.